advisor to budget director. Hard work is all I know. As the only former full-time budget and policy director for Councilmember Giarrusso, I've not only heard your issues, I know where to find the money in the budget to fix them, and I'm going to use that knowledge to bring back better city services to you by building a city workforce to turn your streetlights on faster, to have Super Bowl level coordination every day. And I'll be completely accessible, not just through email, but in your neighborhoods. Being a council member means being there for you 24/7, answering your calls, knowing where to find the answers, and how to deliver the solutions to improve your quality of life. I'm Amy McCarron, number 35 on the ballot, and as your next council member for District A, I'll never stop working for you.
Thank you, Ms. McCarron. Ms. Mossing, you have a 1-minute opening statement.
Thank you, Step Up, so much for having me. My name is Alex Mossing, and I'm running for City Council District A. I am a lifelong New Orleanian and resident of District A, and I currently live in Mid-City with my husband and our daughters, who are both public school students in New Orleans. For the last 15 years, I have been teaching social studies in those very same New Orleans public schools, and I love New Orleans. And I know that despite our very real challenges, we can make New Orleans a place that is comfortable, safe, and amazing for all of its citizens. Over the last 5 years, we've lost thousands of residents, and this issue hits especially close to home for me because these people are my friends and my family. New Orleans is expensive, and despite 20 years of federal disaster funding, we really haven't made much progress on the fronts of infrastructure and city services that New Orleanians deserve. Something you should know about me is I don't do anything by halves. I am wholeheartedly committed to putting all of my energy into making New Orleans and District A the best it can be for all of our residents.
Thank you, Ms. Mossing.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Mossing. Mr. Morrell, you have a 1-minute opening statement.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Bob Morrell, and I'm running for City Council to put people first. I was born at Charity Hospital 40 years ago and grew up here in the metro area. I was public schooled, and my mom was a union teacher assistant, and my dad was a blue collar worker. I feel like New Orleans, like many of you, is central to who we are as a person, not because of the culture or the food or the music, but because of the people that we call family, that we call neighbors, that we call coworkers, that we call comrades. I'm a community organizer. I have been for the last 5 years. I'm a member of the New Orleans Democratic Socialists of America, where I've served on the local council for the last 2 years. I've met some of you through coalition work, and through working with Step Up Louisiana, I actually became a member earlier this year. And I've been very proud of the work that Step Up Louisiana, as well as all the different coalition members around the Workers' Bill of Rights, as well as saving our New Orleans libraries, is very impactful for me. Organizing is part of how we make change in this city, and I find it critical to have that representation on the dais and city council.
Thank you, Mr. Morrell.
Thank you.
I just want to check in. Amy, Alex, and Robert, can you guys hear the timer going off?
No, I
You
can't.
didn't hear it. So it's going off on my end. So I'm sorry to have to step in, but when it beeps on my end, I'm trying to make you hear it, but you can't hear it. So I'll just step in. I'll try to let you finish the thought you're in, and then I'll just step in and say thank you so we can go to the next candidate. I apologize that you can't hear it. I'll put it close. Maybe if I do this, you can hear it. I don't know. Let's see. Let's see if that works. All right. So at this time, we'll move on to the questions. As you know, District A encompasses parts of Mid-City, Lakeview, Holly Grove, Carrollton, and the Uptown neighborhoods. So these questions will be specific to the district, and we'll start with Robert Morrell. Do you support stricter regulations on short-term rentals like Airbnb to prevent displacement of longtime residents? If so, what specific policies would you implement? You have 1 minute.
Thank you. I believe commodified housing has been one of the major proponents of the affordability crisis here in New Orleans. So I absolutely oppose commercial and whole home short-term rentals. And ideally, I'd like to put a ban on the practice of having short-term rentals altogether. But we have to be practical because there are working class people that need to have supplemental income to help with their affordable housing, right? So I'd like to have a municipal offering for tenants as well as for people that have housing to make that available so that eventually we can get rid of these for-profit short-term rental companies. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morrell. Ms. Mossing, do you support stricter regulations on short-term rentals like Airbnb to prevent displacement of long-term residents? If so, what specific policies would you implement? You have 1 minute.
I do support regulations on short-term rentals. I know this is true in my neighborhood, especially. So many of the houses on my own block have been converted to short-term rentals, and it's not surprising that our property taxes are increasing when we have this sort of like inflated version of property of our values because of the short-term rental market. So I would say, first of all short-term rentals should be policed in the same way that hotels are. They should have the same level of taxes applied as our major hospitality industry buildings. So there's no reason you should have to pay more in taxes at a Hilton and less at a short-term rental. That gives those short-term rentals an unfair advantage. So that's a policy I would pursue right away. And then further than that, I think that we need to make sure we're enforcing the regulations that currently exist. So we really need to beef up our enforcement of the existing policies that should put some limitations on these rentals that are often out of hand and nuisances in neighborhoods beyond just creating price impacts that are unsustainable for our community.
Thank you, Ms. Mossing. Ms. McCarron, do you support stricter regulations on short-term rentals like Airbnb to prevent displacement of long-term residents? If so, what specific policies would you implement? You have 1 minute.
Thank you. Yes, I do support stricter regulations, and I agree. We actually really need to crack down on the enforcement of it. Something that we can do immediately is increase the nightly fees that are charged to Airbnb owners and the people that are paying to rent the spaces. And we can use that for enforcement. In fact, that fund has a little over $11 million in it that we should be using to enforce our current regulations. And I do not believe that we should expand upon those regulations either. As far as commercial goes, we haven't had the study done yet, and I do not see us moving forward with any future commercial STRs. But like I said, we do need to have stricter enforcement, and we need to make sure that we're working with our state partners to get a plan for how we're going to work with Airbnb to actually remove listings when they say they're going to remove them. Because what's happening right now is that they remove them from their site and then they're put up immediately again. So we need to have stricter regulations surrounding that too.
Thank you, Ms. McCarron. Ms. Mossing, what concrete legislative actions will you champion to ensure housing justice and affordability in District 8? You have 1 minute.
So I think that we've taken a good first step in establishing the Housing Trust Fund. I'd really like to see that fund allocated in a variety of creative ways to help reach as many residents as possible. So one thing I'd like to see is if a big part of our affordability crisis is also these insurance increases that we've seen over the last few years, I want to make sure that we are creating pathways for people to help reduce those insurance costs. So being able to use that housing fund to maybe promote and subsidize the fortified roofing program, I think would be a really great first step. That would sort of both help with an important repair and also help lower costs over time. I think thinking about other ways that we can collaborate with our state legislators to really make sure we're holding insurance companies accountable is important for this issue. And then finally, I think increasing the homestead exemption is something we need to do to be competitive with states like Texas, which have already taken those actions. So those are legislative moves that I would definitely advocate.
Thank you, Ms. Mossing. Ms. McCarron, what concrete legislative actions will you champion to ensure housing justice and affordability in District 8? You have 1 minute.
Thank you. Well, I'm proud to have worked with Councilmember Giarrusso on a gap financing fund that we did while I was there as his policy and budget director. And I think that is the main thing that is a problem at the state level, that we, the city, are funding gap financing projects for our affordable and workforce housing, but they are getting stuck at the state level at the State Bond Commission. So that would be my first stop, is to really talk with our legislators in Baton Rouge and see how we can move things forward, because the process is taking so long that other projects that the city has offered gap financing to is not getting done because they are stuck at this level in the bond commission. So that's one thing that I would pursue immediately. The other thing is the fortified roofing was made permanent, and we need to figure out with that our affordable housing fund that we can provide some incentives for people to do that, so that way we can lower their insurance costs. I appreciate that it was made permanent by the state legislature. So really, however the city can assist by
Thank you,
using the
Ms.
housing trust
McCarran.
fund is what I would work towards.
Thank you, Ms. McCarran. Mr. Morrell, what concrete legislative actions will you champion to ensure housing justice and affordability in District 8? You have 1 minute.
Thank you. Well, first, I would roll back some of the exclusionary zoning that was passed over the last 8 years, primarily trying to combat doubles to dorms, but in the process have been additional hurdles for affordable housing developers. I've spoken to some of them in Holly Grove, and they've mentioned the fact that the parking minimums are becoming a little bit challenging to try to make sure that they're able to do. So I want to make an easy path for us to make sure that we're actually able to fulfill the housing stock that we need right now. The estimates rolling around are around like 40,000 more units. So in addition to that, I would try to actually allocate the housing trust fund to housing people. I know that we want to try to keep people housed, which is an important critical part, but we need to make sure that we're providing housing as well, whether that means developing social housing, trying to expand land, community land trusts. I'd also like to try to start a commission to look into municipal banking. This would allow us to have our own independent revenue sources that we're not reliant upon the state to actually fulfill their promises to house people. So these are just some of the many issues that we can directly address in trying to make sure that people are getting housed, is trying to get them before they're facing eviction court. A lot of these services kick in after
Thank
the
you,
fact,
Mr.
and we need to
Morrell.
try to get before that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morrell. Ms. McCarran, what is your plan to expand voluntary community-based mental health and addiction treatment services across the city? You have 1 minute.
Thank you. Well, I know that as policy and budget director for Councilmember Giarrusso, I work directly with him to fund Thrive Kids and the expansion of that. And that has been a huge program for working with mental health for our kids. And if we continue to fund it as we promised we would in the school board contract and partnership, then we would be able to fund it at every single school. Whereas every single school would have someone on site from Thrive Kids to provide mental health care and wraparound services for families. So I would work to make sure that the money that we promised the school board they would get is actually moves forward for the next 10 years to provide that service.
Thank you, Ms. McCarran. Mr. Morrell, what is your plan to expand voluntary community-based mental health and addiction treatment services across the city? You have 1 minute.
Thank you. One of the things that I think is important is that we are not too reliant upon nonprofits in order to provide very critical services. And I'm not trying to devalue the work that they're doing, because it's vital and necessary. But as we've seen from the attacks of the federal government on these types of funding for these programs, it's essential that we try to have municipal healthcare available. I do appreciate the work that Thrive Kids was mentioned. And I want to see that not necessarily expanded through a nonprofit service, but like I said, through either the school district itself or ideally through the city's health department. The health department used to be very robust. And as we've seen since Katrina, it's withered down. And as a result of that, the health of our city has withered down. So it's important that we restore that to provide centers for people with zero to low costs, as well as low barrier as possible. We can get people to get this help. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morrell. Ms. Mossing, what is your plan to expand voluntary community-based mental health and addiction treatment services across the city? You have 1 minute.
So I was fortunate enough to recently get to visit Odyssey House, Louisiana, which is one of our large local providers for mental health services and addiction. And I think the work that they are doing with the city right now is a great model for what we can build on. So they're not only running their own addiction services program in their sort of like mental health facilities, they're also contracted with the city to run the low barrier homeless shelter and then also to provide the support services like the sobering center. So I would say we've got the expertise available in organizations like Odyssey House, and we should build out these partnerships in the way that Thrive Kids has been like a really productive public-private partnership between the City of New Orleans Public Schools and some of our local healthcare providers. I think we should use that sort of format and then work with organizations like Odyssey House to continue to build their capacity because they've clearly got a great formula that's working for us. And we have those resources. We should use that institutional knowledge to create opportunities for more people throughout the city to access
Thank you,
those
Ms.
services.
Mawson. Thank you, Ms. Mawson. Mr. Morrell, how will you support and expand community-led public safety initiatives such as violence interruption teams and youth outreach programs? You have 1 minute.
Yeah, so one of the parts of my platform is creating a participatory budgeting process. City Council is allocated, I think it's $25 million per district council member. And I'd like to make that available to the public to submit their own proposals and to try to get involved in elevating a lot of these programs that are successful, that are actually community driven by people that are deeply embedded because it's their family that it is being affected by gun violence. So I think it's important to expand upon that with, again, municipal general funds. Excuse me. But more importantly, I think we need to find ways to do violence intervention that doesn't require people getting put into the criminal justice system. So any type of programming that we can do to avert that is something that I would be in full support of. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morrell. Ms. Mossing, how will you support and expand community-led public safety initiatives such as violence interruption teams and youth outreach programs? You have 1 minute.
So as a teacher, I think I get to see this sort of firsthand in action every single day. It's really, really important for our kids to have safe, productive activities and spaces to go to in order to keep them not just safe, but also like engaged in really positive ways. So I think making sure that we continue to fully fund NORD is like the most basic thing that we can do. Making sure that we have after school programs that address a variety of age levels and interest levels is really important. I think having a really great opportunity for people who have been involved in the justice system is to sort of focus on a restorative justice practice of having them become those interrupters in their neighborhood to explain how they would do things differently, how they could do things differently. I think allowing people to reintegrate that way is really powerful, and it helps maybe other kids who see themselves in those people to sort of think about their options differently. So I would say fully funding those kinds of programs is important, and then also making sure that we've really got some pathways to productive future. So making sure that we're talking to kids early about what workforce development opportunities are out there and what
Thank
some
you,
good
Ms. Mossing.
industries would be.
Thank you, Ms. Mossing. Ms. McCarron, how will you support and expand community-led public safety initiatives such as violence interruption teams and youth outreach programs? You have 1 minute.
Thank you. Well, as part of being policy and budget director for Councilmember Giarrusso, I helped the council fund things like Ubuntu Village, and I know the programs that are working and helping solve our crime crisis. And what I want to do is for programming for NORD, we need to take the maintenance portion out of NORD's budget and move that to Parks and Parkways. So we can fully fund NORD in a way that they are providing only programming to kids, that they are not worrying about the maintenance of their facilities. That needs to come from a different department. And when I say fully fund NORD, we need to make sure that we're offering programs after school, during the weekends, and that we're working with the community and we're out there talking to our community youth and asking them, what kind of programs do you want to see? Not every kid wants to be in a sport. I know my kids, they don't like sports. They like doing other things. So if what are the needs of the community and what are the interests of the kids, and we need to fund it that way and make sure that we're providing that programming. And I think by taking the maintenance portion away from Nord will help with those programs and give our kids an opportunity to have something fun to do on the weekends and during the summer.
Thank you, Ms. McCarron. Ms. Mossing, do you believe District A streets and transit options are safe and accessible? What improvements would you prioritize? You have 1 minute.
I think we can do better, certainly. So I would say our transportation system is really uneven. So I live really close to the streetcar line. My husband actually uses it as his exclusive form of transportation to and from work every day. But the streetcar line does not reach everybody. And I think that our RTA system again, it's still inconsistent in terms of timeliness. Some days things are running really smoothly, days things are a mess. That's a real hardship for people who are relying on that transportation to get to whatever employment they have. So I think working more closely with RTA to expand bus routes, to expand like streetcar timetables, to make sure that we are getting to all of the neighborhoods and not just like some core arteries. Like we shouldn't only be focused on making sure we can move tourists around between the cemeteries and downtown. We should make sure that everyday New Orleanians can get to their jobs wherever they might be in the city from wherever their neighborhood is. And I think the same is true for kids. I'd like to see RTA offer youth bus services or youth access passes.
Thank you,
so that
Ms.
our young
Mossing.
people.
Thank you, Ms. Mossing. Ms. McCarron, do you believe District A streets and transit options are safe and accessible? What improvements would you prioritize? You have 1 minute.
Well, one of the things I think we need to increase the bus routes and we need to increase the timing of our buses. I think that there are plenty of times where people either they miss a bus or a bus hasn't come, and then the next bus that is available to come pick them up to go to work is not available, or it's different. We haven't done maintenance on it and there's a bus not available. So we definitely need to act quickly to increase the number of buses that are running and the times of these buses. The other thing is, the youth fairs, we funded that with our American Rescue Plan Act dollars, and we need to continue that program because we saw results from that where kids and everyone was riding the bus and it was free fares for everybody. So that is a huge opportunity and something that we need to continue. The other thing I'm going to say really quickly, I know I only have a few seconds left, but we need to work on our streets and infrastructure if we're going to get any of this done.
Thank you, Ms. McCarron. Mr. Morrell, do you believe District A streets and transit options are safe and accessible? What improvements would you prioritize? You have 1 minute.
Well, I'm a cyclist and public transit user, so I could tell you the dangerous parts and the safe parts. Unfortunately, some of my knees can't really handle some of the streets. So obviously, when we talk about surface repairs, we need to start prioritizing public transit and vehicular and pedestrian transit as well. I believe that everyone has the right to move freely in the city. And I will agree on obviously expanding routes and making sure things are consistent, but that requires an expanded workforce as well, which means we need to fund RTA not as a for-profit service, but as a public service. That is okay to have an operational loss that can actually be funded by people paying their fair share. I will say that I'm tired of seeing cyclists dying, and it's unacceptable that we keep having to put up ghost bikes, and that is something critical to me that we make sure that that never happens again. And I don't want kids or adults being run over by cars. We need protected cycling lanes all over the city, especially in District A. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morrell. Ms. McCarron, should the city focus more on building new developments or rehabbing and better utilizing existing homes and storefronts? You have 1 minute.
Yeah, I think right now we do need to focus on utilizing what we have or using our laws, new code enforcement laws with criminal blight, to target people that are not following what they're supposed to be doing as far as property upkeep. The city owns a ton of buildings and we just don't have the workforce to actually maintain these facilities. So we need to build that workforce and maintain these facilities and then come up with incentives for people to develop them into housing or public use facilities.
Thank you, Ms. McCarron. Mr. Morrell, should the city focus more on building new developments or rehabbing and better utilizing existing homes and storefronts? You have 1 minute.
Why not both, right? I definitely think that we need to have more of a focus on rehabilitation. There's a lot of great entrepreneurs that are trying to start up new projects all across the city, and I applaud their efforts. Ultimately, though, I would like us to think outside the box and think about public housing, or more specifically, social housing, where we're really trying to make sure that the land is being maintained by the community, right? The people that live there, that have lived there. So I want to use eminent domain to take back blighted properties and make them into the community, where the community gets to decide what they want to have on there. But yeah, I think that with the challenges that we've had with obviously all the tariffs that have been happening, trying to get the supply chain of building as many houses as we need right now is insufficient. So we definitely need to have a focus on rehabilitation in addition to new development. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Morrell. Ms. Mossing, should the city focus more on building new developments or rehabbing and better utilizing existing homes and storefronts? You have 1 minute.
I'd like to see us rehabbing our existing homes and storefronts. I think so much of what makes a lot of New Orleans neighborhoods sort of character driven is embedded in these sort of historic properties and these storefronts that already fit into neighborhoods. And I think it would be great if we could come up with some incentive plans to encourage investors and developers to really think creatively about how we can use these properties, whether that is converting interesting buildings into housing, or just sort of better maintaining our existing infrastructure in stock and figuring out what fits best. I think that part of our neighborhood character is lost when we try to tear things down and make way for sort of big new developments. And I love New Orleans, and part of New Orleans is our colorful facilities, and we should hang on to those as much as possible.
Thank you, Ms. Mossing. Mr. Morrell, what policies will you support to make District A more resilient to flooding and extreme weather? You have 1 minute.
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier the removal of parking minimums. That does increase the amount of impermeable concrete that has led to some additional flooding. Obviously, our gray infrastructure, so concrete and pipes, it's not able to keep up anymore. The extreme rapid intensification of storms is outpacing our ability to pump. We have old pumps that are probably going to require billions of dollars to replace. So I want to see focus in using green infrastructure and blue infrastructure to retain water as best as possible. I'd love to see rain barrels on people's houses as much as possible, get funding along that. That includes gutter installations and things like that. But more importantly, community gardens and trying to incentivize adding more trees. Those are the big sponges that take up all of our rainwater that we still have not recovered from Katrina. And I'd love to see our foliage restored. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morrell. Ms. Mossing, what policies will you support to make District A more resilient to flooding and extreme weather? You have 1 minute.
Yeah, so I started my career actually in green building. And so green infrastructure is something that's always been really near and dear to my heart. I think that I agree with Mr. Morrell that we should absolutely be focused on planting more of those trees. That we lost a single cypress tree can soak up like 80,000 gallons of water at a time, which is an incredible resource when we're talking about trying to get water out of the streets and out of our drains, which don't always work very effectively. I think incentivizing local homeowners to sort of make these adjustments to their own property and their own neighborhoods is a really great opportunity that we haven't tapped into yet. And I think finally, when I was a kid pre-Katrina here in New Orleans, I did a summer service project where I helped remove blighted properties and convert vacant lots into community gardens. And I think helping our kids get more involved in programs like that would be a really great resource for our city.
Thank you, Ms. Mossing. Ms. McCarron, what policies will you support to make District A more resilient to flooding and extreme weather? You have 1 minute.
Thank you. So a couple things. I do think we need to integrate the urban heat plan, which is already under development to help prioritize heat mitigation in all infrastructure. We also need to live with permeable concrete, blue infrastructure, like both the other candidates said, including bioswales and tougher code enforcement on over concreting, which I know is a huge issue in our uptown part of District A. The other thing is, we had some drainage studies completed under Councilmember Giarrusso, and now there are plans for a couple of projects. Those projects need to be funded, and actually, I'm told that they are in the next bond proposition, which will be on everyone's ballot in November. So it's really important that we pay attention to that and get that funded because those will also improve our drainage, especially in District A, in Mid-City and the Lakeview areas.
Thank you, Ms. McCarron. Ms. Mossing, how do you plan to protect and expand public parks and green infrastructure in District A? You have 1 minute.
So I think this goes back to what we were talking about with some of our youth programming. I think new District A has City Park and Audubon Park within its confines, and those are two really huge resources in our city. Even though they're sort of public-private partnerships in a lot of ways, I think making sure that we support those entities and create spaces for all New Orleanians to access those areas, which happen to be in District A, is a priority for me. I think otherwise, we do have a lot of opportunity if we are talking about issues of blight to convert spaces that are sort of a problem currently into green spaces. We need to do more to fund parks and parkways, and also to find more staffing for parks and parkways for them to be able to keep up with the existing parks and hopefully to expand on those green spaces for our community.
Thank you, Ms. Mossing. Ms. McCarron, how do you plan to protect and expand public parks and green infrastructure in District A? You have 1 minute.
Yeah, so I think initially Parks and Parkways and NORD need to be, I talked about this before, that we need to move the maintenance portion of NORD into Parks and Parkways so that way they can just focus on picking up our parks and our NORD facilities. The other thing is working with City Park and Audubon Park to make sure they have the resources they need in implementing their plans. And the other thing is all of our NORD playgrounds should have coverings over them so our kids can play during the summer, and splash pads at these places. I know not every single park right now has a covering, so the equipment, especially with our heat, gets really hot and kids aren't able to play during the summer on these things. So that's, I think, an initial easy reach to make sure that we are funding and checking all of our playgrounds to make sure they have adequate shade so our kids can play.
Thank you, Ms. McCarron. Mr. Morrell, how do you plan to protect and expand public parks and green infrastructure in District 8? You have 1 minute.
I'm clearly a parent of young children, as are the other candidates, because splash pads, y'all, like they have such a little amount of cost, and they cool places. They keep kids and parents cool. More importantly, it's fun recreation that I think, what's the point of being in the city if not to enjoy it, right? Obviously, with the parks budget, I would love to see it not only being maintained by the dedicated funding that it gets through millages, but more importantly, trying to get dedicated general funding as well. I think even if it's just a small portion of the budget, in order to have that consistent rate of investment in our public spaces is very important. I believe in the right to the city. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that political analysis, but it's very important for us as an urban area to have shared space that is ours, right? So it's very vital that if we want to maintain the integrity of our city, we need to maintain and expand the integrity of our public spaces. And that especially means our green infrastructure. Not necessarily everything has to be for recreation, it just needs to be for cooling and protecting spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morrell. Ms. McCarron, how will you ensure transparency and regular communication with constituents? You have 1 minute.
Thank you. So this is something I talk a lot about. Being your council member is not just being at City Hall answering your emails, it's being in the neighborhoods. And what I mean by that is I want to be out in the district once a week with a staff person at a NORD facility, at a community center, at a church, somewhere where I can actually reach residents and be available to them. I also want to have that Super Bowl level of coordination every single day by having meetings with our departments and coordinating between Department of Public Works and Sewage and Water Board and Sanitation, all the departments that need to sit down and go through everything, go through our list and say, here's our priorities for District A, what's getting done, what isn't getting done. And then what I would plan to do after that is after this meeting is to put out to my newsletter to residents to make sure that they have the accurate information and they see the work that I'm doing, they see the questions I'm asking and the answers that I'm getting. So that's something I want to make sure that I'm not just at the neighborhood meetings, but I'm in the district once a week talking to people and making sure that I'm completely accessible.
Thank you, Ms. McCarron. Mr. Morrell, how will you ensure transparency and regular communication with constituents? You have 1 minute.
Yeah, so when I ran for this seat 4 years ago, that was one of the big priorities I had was transparency and accountability. I feel like our democracy has been withering away slowly because of the lack of accountability and oversight that the public has on its elected officials. So I often talk about flipping the table, right, or flipping the system. I really want to have a more groundswell, bottom-up form of governance when it comes to District A, and that means number one, actively listening to people, right? So hosting town halls, having regular, frequent meetings in communities, not just through neighborhood associations, but at workplaces, at reading groups, at recreational events, things like that. Also, getting in touch with the young people. I feel like they're one of the most neglected parts of our city because they have no input. And I want to make sure that we're able to do that. And effective communication as a project manager, it's one of my top priorities. And I feel like we need to be active communicators, not just in email lists and postcards, but making sure we're knocking on people's doors to let them know. And when it comes to transparency, I am very open about my filings. I do my own filings. I want people to hold me accountable as best as possible, both as a candidate and an elected official.
Thank you, Mr. Morrell. Ms. Mossing, how will you ensure transparency and regular communication with constituents? You have 1 minute.
Yeah, so I think that communication is obviously really important and accessibility is really important. And I think so a piece that sometimes seems like getting lost lately is people have a way to get in touch with their council members, but what happens once they've given that information is the black box that I think Bob was talking about just now. So this is something that I'm really interested in. I'm a take action kind of person. I am happy and I definitely want to hear all of the concerns of my constituents. But more than that, I want them to be able to see what is done about them. So I think having a follow-up piece in place for making sure that people can close the loop. Like it's not just that they reported a problem, it's that then they can see where the solution is in process. And technology is an amazing thing. We've got for sure the resources and like sort of the ability to build systems to track those kinds of complaints. And our 311 system is not really cutting it right now, but I deeply believe that it is a pretty basic fix that we could not just take in complaints and concerns and issues, but also then create an open platform for people to see what's happening to be done about them.
Thank you, Ms. Mossing. Mr. Morrell, what areas of the city budget do you believe need increased investment and where would you consider cuts? You have 1 minute.
So our public libraries and public school system do not get any general funds right now. And both of them are facing crises with their facilities where their capital funding is not adequate enough to keep up with air conditioning's failing right now in this extreme heat. And as a result, they're closing, right? Or the school district is trying to right size it by selling them in order to cover costs because it's too expensive to maintain. So for me, I want to make sure that we're investing in our youth, and that includes general funding for capital projects with the library and with the school district. So that way we're keeping kids nice and cool, as well as the workers, and making sure that they're safe. I would probably dedicate that funding away from NOPD, which has been, in spite of its claims of understaffing, have led to a decrease in our violent crime rates. So I'd like to see some more of that money being invested directly into our kids. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Morrell. Ms. Mossing, what areas of the city budget do you believe need increased investment and where would you consider cuts? You have 1 minute.
I'm pretty deeply concerned about how underfunded the Department of Public Works has been, considering our infrastructure challenges. And we've recently had all of this big investment in capital projects, which have been their own kind of challenge as they've created a lot of headaches for us with open road work. But Once that roadwork is complete, we really need to make sure that we are doing our part to maintain it so that we don't find ourselves in another hole where we're digging ourselves out from under like a massive amount of like backlog, unmanaged, unmaintained infrastructure. So I would say we need to really make sure that we are figuring out how to fully fund our essential infrastructure. I would say that we should be looking through some of the contracts that we have for outside agencies. If we were hiring our own in-house teams, we would probably be able to cut a lot of sort of contract funds from maybe like let's say media budgets and like outside attorney services. I feel like those are places that we could reduce our costs by bringing services in-house and then translate that to our infrastructure needs.
Thank you, Ms. Mawson. Ms. McCarron, what areas of the city budget do you believe need increased investment, and where would you consider cuts? You have 1 minute.
Thank you. So a couple different things. As I said before, NORD maintenance needs to be taken out of NORD and moved to parks and parkways. I think we need to use our budget better by having less reliance on outside contractors. And this is something that I've talked about since day one of my campaign. We have one electrician that works for the city, so we have to hire an outside contractor. It costs way more than it would if we could just hire and have workforce development for in-house teams. Having a city workforce to provide these better services, we would save a lot more money and we'd be providing jobs to people that with higher than a living wage, and we're able to track and manage those people as well. The other thing is, since I have a financial planning background, I would love to sit down with the next administration and work out a 5-year financial plan together on how we're going to get some of this infrastructure done. Meaning that when you're doing a financial plan for your personal finances, you have different buckets of things. You have a short-term bucket, you have a medium-term, and you have a long-term bucket. We need to prioritize our needs for infrastructure and planning on this on finances to figure out what are our needs for that short term, and then what
Thank you,
are the
Ms.
needs for long
McCarron.
term. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCarron. Ms. Mawson, do you support merging the Sewage and Water Board with the Department of Public Works to improve efficiency? You have 1 minute.
I think in an ideal world, yes, I think it would be great to bring the Sewage and Water Board under the umbrella of the Department of Public Works at the very least, because I think that's going to be a real challenge that's going to involve our state level politicians. I think at the very least, they need to collaborate a lot more closely. And I think that's doable today. So when I think about the DPW dashboard sort of tracking projects, and I think about the comparable one for Sewage and Water Board, I don't see a reason that they can't have those two dashboards merged and overlapped, like where residents can see all of the Sewage and Water Board and the DPW projects at once. And so those two agencies can see those projects at once too. So I think ideally they'd be together. In the world as it is now, we can do more to collaborate.
Thank you, Ms. Mawson. Ms. McCarron, do you support merging the Sewage and Water Board with the Department of Public Works to improve efficiency? You have 1 minute.
So this last year, we recently at the state level gave the drainage portion all to Sewage and Water Board. So that means all of your catch basins, everything is under the responsibility of Sewage and Water Board. I think at this point, we've got to give it at least a year to see how that works. The city council gave Sewage and Water Board a lot of funding to clean out those drains. So I think we need to make sure that we are holding them accountable on how much they're actually cleaning out and maintaining it before I can answer and say that we should merge the two under DPW. We need to make sure that they are working together on these things, specifically the drainage portion, but also on our infrastructure side as well. You know, when they tear up a street for something, it becomes the responsibility of Department of Public Works to pave that street back. So we've got to make sure that the two are talking to each other and go from there on how we merge it, whether it's under Sewage and Water Board or DPW.
Thank you, Ms. McCarron. Mr. Morrell, do you support merging the Sewage and Water Board with the Department of Public Works to improve efficiency? You have 1 minute.
Yeah, I agree with Ms. Mossing in that in an ideal world, I like to describe it as waving a magic wand that we could do this magically because that's kind of the magic that we exist in this reality, that we have a very hostile legislation as well as executive in Baton Rouge that want to privatize our waterworks so that wealthy contractors can get even more of the money. And that's something that we need to make sure that we protect against. So I want to make sure that we're trying to bring it into Department of Public Works that is under the city control. Otherwise, we're going to have to wrangle with this back and forth that we've had for over 100 years now, and it's not working, right? But absolutely in trying to make sure that we're working on the same page. I remember meeting with one of the head project managers of DPW, and we talked about sort of the back end technical system of project management and how that backs up those dashboards. Sewage and Water Board has a similar system, but they're just not tied in. So it's a very much a doable system. It's just political willpower to get it done. I want to make sure that we're centralized on our plans when it comes to road work as well. So that way we're sequencing it correctly. We're not digging up something that was just repaved. And overall, just trying to drive down costs means driving down those contractor fees, right? So bringing those services
Thank you,
back
Mr. Morrell.
into city jobs will save us money. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Morrell. Ms. McCarron, how would you protect legacy homeowners from rising property taxes and displacement? You have 1 minute.
So we've got to actually fund the anti-displacement fund as number one. And number two, we've got to work with our state legislature. They've got to figure out the insurance crisis, but we've got to figure out how we can provide better city services for people. So the value that they're paying, they're actually receiving those services for. The fortified, like I said before, the fortified roof program was made permanent. So we've got to figure out how the city can help put these fortified roofs on homes for people to get discounts on there and stay in their homes.
Thank you, Ms. McCarron. Mr. Morrell, how would you protect legacy homeowners from rising property taxes and displacement? You have 1 minute.
Yes, I think first and foremost, standardizing the way that we do our tax assessments. Assessor Errol Williams has been using sales chasing tactics now for several decades, and he's the only one in the entire state that does this way. So we need to codify that to make sure that he stops doing this. So it only favors large property owners, and it's hurting oftentimes people on fixed income that cannot afford anymore. And thankfully, the age cap has helped a lot, and I'd like to see that potentially lowered so that we can get more people into having that tax freeze. I think ultimately, though, there are so many, it's around 40% of homeowners and 58% of renters are cost burdened by your utilities, and that's energy. And we need to make sure that we're regulating energy to stop these price increases. They're trying right now to use settlement money that they have to pay in order to pay for their rate increase for 1 year, but then you're going to be on the hook for it again. So it's important that we're making sure energy actually pays for the things that they're supposed to be paying for. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Morrell. Ms. Mossing, how would you protect legacy homeowners from rising property taxes and displacement? You have 1 minute.
So I would absolutely, again, I said this earlier, but I would advocate for our legislative coalition to really work to get a homestead exemption increase, because I think that'll go a long way in helping mitigate some of these major property tax increases that we've seen, especially in light of short-term rental increases in New Orleans. I think also, I would advocate for lowering the age cap on when your property taxes increase. I think that's a really like a responsible, reasonable thing to do. And I would also really, again, like to expand access to programs that are going to help us reduce our insurance rates. So whether that's advocating for the state legislature to really work with insurance companies or to expand incentives here, find more funding for our affordable housing fund, find more funding for programs like the fortified roof program. I think those are our best options for helping people with these immediate cost increases.
Thank you, Ms. Mossing. Mr. Morrell, do you support Step Up's model of sustainable community schools? And if so, how will you help collaborate city funds and school district funds to implement the sustainable community schools model? What will you do to retrieve the $90 million that is owed to the New Orleans public school system? You have 1 minute.
Thank you. So I was on the steps of City Hall protesting alongside so many parents and children and educators demanding that the settlement money gets done. And I would absolutely be working with the next mayor to make sure that we have a CAO that is willing to sign onto the agreement that they already said that they would. Part of the thing that I love about the sustainable model that Step Up is trying to support is making sure that it's a focus on holistic solutions, right? And so empowering the school district to be in a position to where they can take on failing charters like they did with the Leah Chase School. I think that that goes a long way in making sure that we have equitable resources being established, that we can have control over the curriculum that is being applied at these charter schools, and more to the point, that we can have access that is not being, hey, for lack of a better word, segregated. Right now, we're finding our level of racial segregation and economic class segregation almost in levels from the 70s. And we need to make sure that we're able to have a fair and equitable public school system. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morrell. Ms. Mossing, do you support Step Up's model of sustainable community schools? And if so, how will you help collaborate city funds and school district funds to implement the sustainable community schools model? What will you do to retrieve the $90 million that is owed to the New Orleans public school system?
So I absolutely support the sustainable schools model. I think that we all know that it's a best practice at this point to incorporate sort of community resources through our schools, because that's where our kids are. Parents and families are very likely to be engaged there. It's a great opportunity for the whole community to receive a lot of services. So, like, again, we've got the Thrive Kids program, which I think is a good sort of jumping off point for how the city and the schools can collaborate to provide not just an education quality for kids, but also the other wraparound services that help families thrive. I think that is essential that the city give the schools the money that is owed to them. I would, as a city council person, lean heavily on our next mayoral administration to release those funds. This year, my school lost 3 really excellent teachers to other states for higher pay and a better quality of life, and that's not sustainable. Also, this year, 800 fewer babies were born in the city. That's 30 kindergarten classes worth of students in a few years. And if we're not addressing those needs in our school community, then we're going to fall much further behind than we even are at this point.
Thank you, Ms. Mossing. Ms. McCarron, do you support Step Up's model of sustainable community schools? And if so, how will you help collaborate city funds and school district funds to implement the sustainable community schools model? What will you do to retrieve the $90 million that is owed to the New Orleans public school system?
Yes, I do support Step Up's sustainable community schools. And also, I would take the lead with our school board partners that are a duly elected body. In fact, I have good relationships with all of them. In fact, 2 of them have endorsed me as a candidate because they have seen the work that I did on that $90 million settlement. I directly wrote legislation for Councilmember Giarruso's office to make that happen and to get that passed. And it's even more frustrating to me because that we did not get this going because I worked directly on that with him. And we need to make sure that this next administration is aware that this next council will fight to move that forward, because that is what we promised. Thrive Kids is one of the programs that was funded with that money, and they are dependent upon that funding to move things forward. And if we continue with that funding, we're able to get help in every single school. That's every single school there is. So yes, those are the steps that I would take, and I fully support Step Up's plan for that.
Thank you, Ms. McCarron. Ms. McCarron, last November, New Orleans passed the Workers' Bill of Rights by 80%, sending a clear message that New Orleans stands with workers. Step Up has been working with the New Orleans Health Department to create the Healthy Workplace Program. How will you help employers in this city get in line with the Workers' Bill of Rights? And can we count on you to move resources to the Healthy Workplace Program, which will work with employers to improve working conditions?
Sorry, if I was on mute. Yes, I will definitely work with Step Up on advancing these things. You know, the Workers' Bill of Rights was a huge, important part of Step Up's, and to push back on efforts nationwide to squeeze working people in favor of large institutions. And I support and will move forward the work of the New Orleans Health Department to give workers a voice and highlight good workplace practices across our community and make sure that at least the city is doing that model, and then work with our partners in the private sector to move that forward as well. And I know the health department did an excellent job on this incentive to help employers improve. So I can appreciate the work that Dr. Avegno did on this work.
Thank you, Ms. McCarron. Ms. Mossing. Last November, New Orleans passed the Workers' Bill of Rights by 80%, sending a clear message that New Orleans stands with workers. Step Up has been working with the New Orleans Health Department to create the Healthy Workplace Program. How will you help employers in this city get in line with the Workers' Bill of Rights? And can we count on you to move resources to the Healthy Workplace Program, which will work with employers to improve working conditions?
I was so happy to see the Workers' Bill of Rights passed, first of all. But I have to say, what I haven't heard is any communication about next steps and next sort of actions in implementing it. And so I'm glad to hear that some of that work has been going on with the health department. But what that tells me is we're not doing a good job exposing that to the community. So I think a first step that I would take would be to really highlight and broadcast the good work that's going on to support the Workers' Bill of Rights, and then creating incentives for businesses to get on board. So how can we publicize and highlight these excellent businesses? If people don't know which businesses are involved or helping, and there's no way to sort of showcase them, then we're going to have fewer businesses who care about actually pursuing those steps. And I think that's an easy first place to start, making sure that we are really drawing attention to the positive things happening with the businesses who choose to get on with the Healthy Workplaces program.
Thank you, Ms. Mossy. Mr. Morrell. Last November, New Orleans passed the Workers' Bill of Rights by 80%, sending a clear message that New Orleans stands with workers. Step Up has been working with the New Orleans Health Department to create healthy workplace programs. How will you help employers in this city get in line with the Workers' Bill of Rights? And can we count on you to move resources to the Healthy Workplace Program, which will work with employers to improve working conditions?
You can absolutely count on me. I was in some of the early meetings when there were strategies going on about what this Workers' Bill of Rights program would look like and how do we enforce it and things like that. And seeing it go through City Council, I was there in City Hall advocating for it, making it get on the ballot box, and then going out knocking doors and making sure that people vote for it. So you absolutely can count on me for that. One of the things that I'm committed to is making sure that healthy workplaces include organized workplaces. I want to visit at least 100 workplaces in my first 6 months to talk to the workers, find out what is wrong in their workplaces, what is working right, and making sure that they know that they have the ability and the right to organize their workplace to form a union. And that's how we get employers to really come upon this board, is that if they have a great working relationship with their workers, they're being taken care of, and they have their constitutional rights to organize, then I think that that's a great way for us to incentivize them, is because organized workplaces increase pay, increase happiness, and increase customer satisfaction. So definitely want to see the Healthy Workplace Program implemented with the letter rating grade that was proposed. And I think it just needs a very small portion of funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morrell. Mr. Morrell, Mr. Morrell, what will you do to bring integrity, accountability, and transparency to the council to help build trust with the community? You have 1 minute.
So there's this great book, it's right next to me, Planning from Below by Marta Harnecker. She's a Latin American political scientist and journalist. And one of the things she talks about is how corruption is the inverse of democracy. And the more we are able to democratize our communities, to get them more engaged and involved outside of the ballot box, the less likely you are to have corrupt people. And the reason why is if you're able to fund the initiatives from the community that they get to develop on their own, that they get to coordinate, that's how you know that things get done, because you are watching it. You are there the entire way of the process. So accountability and transparency, like I said, it's a priority of mine dating back to my last campaign. And it's something that is very important to me because we need a healthy democracy right now. And that's how we fight against this rise of fascism, is having people organize at the grassroots level. And I will be there with you. I am a grassroots organizer too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morrell. Ms. McCarron, what will you do to bring integrity, accountability, and transparency to the council to help build trust with the community? You have 1 minute.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to what I said earlier about having community office hours and being in the neighborhoods once a week, to be available for people to come talk to me as opposed to having to go down to City Hall or at their neighborhood meeting where a lot of people don't feel comfortable or they don't feel heard when they're, in a big community meeting. So it really goes back to being in the neighborhoods, being seen, talking with neighbors, talking with businesses, talking with small businesses on the street, making sure that our government is doing what they say they're going to do at these construction sites, ensuring that we have public facing dashboards, ensuring that, the council makes sure that all of these contracts that we do have to have are being implemented correctly and that they're following what they're supposed to be doing and how they're doing it. So, being in the community at least once a week and at the neighborhood meetings is the best way for me to understand what the community needs and how they can understand who I am and the accountability and transparency that I'll bring to the office.
Thank you, Ms. McCarron. Ms. Mossing, what will you do to bring integrity, accountability, and transparency to the council to help build trust with the community? You have 1 minute.
So I would say that again, it's the reason that a lot of people have trouble trusting our elected officials and our systems is that they don't see them working. And so again, my property taxes have doubled over the last 10 years since we've owned our house, but my street still floods. And I think one way to really bring integrity and accountability back is to start doing the things that we say we're going to do. And that is something that people can depend on with me. Like, I'm a take action person. I think, again, I said this earlier, but public facing dashboards that show closing the loop. It's one thing to hear the concern, it's another thing to do something about it. And right now, I feel like we've had a lot more conversation from our elected leaders and sort of like more efforts at like winning the argument publicly, but actually nothing is happening to accomplish the really important tasks that are set before our leaders. So I'd like to change that by actually doing the things that government is supposed to do.
Thank you, Ms. Mossing. Ms. McCarron, we're facing the reality of a city that could be underwater within just a handful of decades, and we are continuously dealing with climate events more and more frequently. Now we are facing major cuts to the National Weather Service. Considering that we are under a federal administration that's actively hostile to climate justice, especially in Black communities, how will you create a sustainable New Orleans that will last for generations? You have 1 minute.
Yes, thank you. So that starts at, I mentioned previously, the drainage projects that are proposed and hopefully funded with this next bond proposition. That's a big start to it. And then we've got to have be an engaged and energetic regulator of our utilities. The council can create new solutions, and the climate committee is currently developing ways to increase the availability of local distributed energy sources. Usually, for example, like solar and battery systems on homes and businesses that can be tied together to work in unison to help save the grid. And then too many people forget that, the city council has unique power to promote new energy policies and can do so unilaterally without the administration, whether it's by forcing a utility to make the grid stronger and more reliable, or by building programs to help make more homes and businesses energy independent. So that's something that I want to move forward and work hard with, because I do know I want my kids that are 6 to have the opportunity to live here when they're old enough. And if we don't start making some changes now, then we won't have a New Orleans that they're going to be able to choose to live in.
Thank you, Ms. McCarron. Ms. Mossing, we're facing the reality of a city that could be underwater within just a handful of decades, and we are continuously dealing with climate events more and more frequently. Now we are facing major cuts to the National Weather Service. Considering that we are under a federal administration that's actively hostile to climate justice, especially in Black communities, how will you create a sustainable New Orleans that will last for generations?
I do think this comes back to a question of some of that sustainable infrastructure. So we obviously need to make sure that we are up to date on our existing gray infrastructure, our pipes, our drainage system, but we also need to be thinking about proactive solutions to help address on a very local level sort of the resources that can help us retain moisture in the area, like find other ways around storing flood water, putting those trees back in place that can help with these things. And then beyond that, we're fortunate, I think, here to have really excellent weather teams. And I think relying on our local meteorologists is, like, it's not ideal that we shouldn't have access to this national data, but at least we have a really strong backbone of meteorologists in our community. And I think we should do whatever we can to support those teams. And then finally, we should be partnering with other cities in the world, not in the United States necessarily, but in the world, who have similar climate challenges to us and who have come up with proactive solutions. So I think thinking about Amsterdam, thinking about
Thank
Venice,
you, Ms.
those are
Mawson.
places to start.
Thank you, Ms. Mawson. Mr. Morrell, we are facing the reality of a city that could be underwater within just a handful of decades, and we are continuously dealing with climate events more and more frequently. Now we are facing major cuts to the National Weather Service. Considering that we are under a federal administration that's actively hostile to climate justice, especially in Black communities, how will you create a sustainable New Orleans that will last for future generations? You have 1 minute.
This is exactly why I ran for office 4 years ago, because I wrote to Councilmember Giarrusso about supporting a Green New Deal resolution, and he very quickly dismissed me. This is something that's been on the front of my mind since I became a parent, especially when it comes to being anti-racist and understanding the relationship between extractive fossil fuels and racial climate justice. So one of the things that's not talked about a lot is our master plan. Our city master plan runs out in 2030. We need to start authoring the brand new one with a focus on sustainability, having zoning that requires new developments, particularly the large developments, to have solar and water retention built into the zoning. We need to decentralize a lot of our electric grid and have community solar farms if possible. We need to expand our cooling centers, and I really love the Together New Orleans Lighthouse program that is putting solar retention on churches so that way when the power does go out during a storm that we're able to cool people. But I looked at Cuba. They're able to handle hurricanes without little to no fatalities every single time, and they've been under a brutal blockade for decades. And we need to start with very much block by block organizing to make sure people are safe and able to respond during storms.
Thank you, Mr. Morrell. Thank you. The following set of questions are considered hot round questions. You will have 30 seconds for each question. I just need to restart the timer for you. Clear it. Here we go. Mr. Morrell, what is your understanding of the city charter? You have 30 seconds.
So the city charter is kind of like the Constitution. It dictates our literal rights and our Bill of Rights. It also contains criminal code. It contains how we understand our zoning to be established. It also does things like protect our neighborhood participation program, which is a fabric of our democracy here in New Orleans.
Thank you, Mr. Morrell. Ms. Mossy, what is your understanding of the city charter? You have 30 seconds.
The city charter is our set of rules. This is our ordinances. This is what keeps the city running. This is how we make decisions. And the council is responsible for amendments to that charter, or like proposing amendments to that charter that our community can vote on. So yeah, I would agree that Constitution is sort of the best analogy for this. As a social studies teacher, that makes sense to me.
Thank you, Ms. Mossy. Ms. McCarron, what is your understanding of the city charter? You have 30 seconds.
Yeah, so the city charter, it's a constitution for our city, not a collection of ordinances. The city charter gives us the power to self-govern, and it protects us from Baton Rouge and other entities. It includes our zoning and our self-governance, and gives the city council the powers to do what they need to do and the mayor to do what she's supposed to do.
Thank you, Ms. McCarron. Ms. McCarron, our parent union has been fighting for years to create safe riding conditions for our children to school. How will you create a city hall that functions and does basic things like inspecting school buses? You have 30 seconds.
Well, I know that the city that the city is supposed to actually make sure our buses are in working condition, and they don't do that fast enough. So we need more employees to do that. But we also need to put into effect the fact that there is no ordinance directing city buses to have air conditioning and safe driving conditions for kids, and we need to work on that like as soon as possible, so our kids are not driving around in this heat in our buses. So that's something that I would definitely work towards getting done for our children.
Thank you, Ms. McCarron. Ms. Mossing, our parent union has been fighting for years to create safe riding conditions for our children to school. How will you create a city hall that functions and does basic things like inspecting school buses? You have 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think we need better enforcement of the existing policies. And we also do need policies in place that require safety functions. It's wild that 40 years in the future, kids are still driving. I don't even know when our bus technology comes from. It feels like it has to have been like from the 1960s, honestly. And considering how unsafe it is for kids to drive around without seatbelts and without AC, that's really worrying. And so I think making sure that we have people available to inspect buses for safety, and then also to create regulations that ensure kids can be safe on buses, and that they're actually being checked for those safety requirements is essential.
Thank you, Ms. Mossing. Mr. Morrell, our parent union has been fighting for years to create safe riding conditions for our children to school. How will you create a city hall that functions and does basic things like inspecting school buses? You have 30 seconds.
Thank you. So one of the things that I think matters is that there's a lack of centralized coordination between all the different charter networks and their own school buses. So we don't have adequate inventory. We don't have adequate certification requests for all the drivers, or if they even have on-bus monitors. But most importantly, like you said, having the city have the capacity to do these types of inspections. But first and foremost, you need to know what you're even dealing with. So having a centralized planning system is what I'd advocate for first.
Thank you, Mr. Morrell. Ms. Mossing, what are you doing to protect New Orleanians from rising utility bills, including Entergy, Sewage and Water Board, and now Delta Utilities, should you earn the support of the voters?
Yeah, so if I was a council member, I would make sure that we were using a really clear formula anytime our utilities requested a rate increase. There should be an objective set of criteria that dictates whether or not that's allowed, to make sure that our utilities are not actually just trying to gain money at the expense of our residents. That's not fair, and there is an easy way to do that with a straightforward funding formula. I would advocate for that to be applied to all utilities.
Thank you, Ms. Mossing. Mr. Morrell, what are you doing to protect New Orleanians from rising utility bills, including Entergy, Sewage and Water Board, and now Delta Utilities, should you earn the support of the voters?
Yeah, so for the last several years, as part of DSA's Make Entergy Pay campaign, we've been organizing users of Entergy. We're kind of forced to because of the monopoly. But we've been organizing to try to make sure that we can fight for our rights to, number one, make sure that we ban residential shutoffs due to bills being behind. Number two, erasing debt. And number three, moving towards the ability to have Entergy as a municipal power utility. I fought against the Delta sale as well. They're a venture capitalist fund, and their whole model is predicated on growth. We need less natural gas, not more. And so as a
Thank you,
regulator,
Mr.
I'll
Morrell.
actually regulate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morrell. Ms. McCarron, what are you doing to protect New Orleanians from rising utility bills, including Entergy, Sewage and Water Board, and now Delta Utilities, should you earn the support of the voters?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Mr. Morell that we need to ban the residential shutoffs. We need to protect our net metering program, so rooftop solar that saves actual real money can continue. Community solar for renters, and this is a program that's currently in progress that I would like to see move forward. Sewage and Water Board should not receive any rate increases until they fix their billing, which is in process. And then more reliability fines, which of course Entergy New Orleans hates if they fail to perform. So we need to continue with those things.
Thank you, Ms. McCarron. Mr. Morrell, what will be your top 3 priorities in your first year in office? You have 30 seconds.
Yeah, so first and foremost is introducing a participatory budgeting process so that people can actually vote where their tax dollars go. That means giving neighborhoods the ability to make propositions that get city funding to create projects like splash pads, right? Number two is making sure that we're investing in our youth, and that starts with expanding the universal basic income program that we have for teenagers, having free transit for all youth in our city, and also making sure that we are devoting funds to the library and the school system. And number three is instituting a workers' council in District A so that we can start increasing the union density and increasing our wages. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morrell. Ms. McCarron, what will be your top 3 priorities in your first year in office? You have 30 seconds.
Thanks. So my top 3 would be workforce development for city workforce, setting up a program where we are actually training and educating people to come work for the city so we can start eliminating our costs for outside contractors. The second thing I would do is working on that 5-year financial plan to get our infrastructure right, making sure that we have enough money in each of those buckets on plans that we can actually execute and setting time limits for those plans, and then working towards that Super Bowl level of coordination every single day by working with the council districts and our partners with Sewage and Water Board and DPW for that better coordination.
Thank you, Ms. McCarron. Ms. Mossing, what will be your top 3 priorities in your first year in office? You have 30 seconds.
So my top priority would be to improve collaboration between the council and city departments to make sure that we are accomplishing our needed goals and infrastructure and budgeting effectively with a full understanding of what those departments need and not just taking the CAO's word for it. Funding youth services. So making sure that all of those NORD programs are robust and inclusive for kids in all neighborhoods across New Orleans, certainly, especially in District A, but everywhere. And then also making sure kids are aware of workforce development opportunities. We have a lot of programs that are run through local nonprofits and also through high school. So coordinating those programs to make sure that kids have access to as much potential and future options as possible. And then finally, in creating some programs to promote affordability. So making sure that we are really creating opportunities for people to lower their housing
Thank you, Ms.
costs.
Mossing. Thank you, Ms. Mossing. The following set of questions are yes or no questions. You will hear the question, you will give a yes or no answer, and I will move on to the next candidate. We will start with Ms. McCarron. Have you received any campaign funds from Entergy or people in PACs associated with Entergy? Ms. McCarron.
No, I have not.
Ms. Mossing.
No, I have not.
Mr. Morrell.
No.
Mr. Morrell, do you support the building of the grain train in the 9th Ward?
No.
Ms. Mossing.
Yes.
Ms. McCarron.
No.
Ms. Mossing, do you support the nurses at UMC in their fight for a fair contract?
Yes.
Ms. McCarron.
Yes.
Mr. Morrell.
Been on the strike line, absolutely.
Ms. McCarron, do you believe students should have access to a free and appropriate public education? Yes or no?
Yes.
Ms. Mossing.
Yes.
Mr. Morrell.
Yes.
Ms. McCarron, will you commit to using the powers vested in you as a council member to fight for a living wage of at least $15 an hour? Yes or no?
Yes.
Ms. Mossing.
Yes.
Mr. Morrell.
Yes.
The last set of questions will be 1 question per candidate. They are candidate-specific questions. So no, you will not hear the same question as your counterparts. We will start with Ms. Mossing. What is your stance on zoning reform to allow more mixed-use development in District 8? You have 30 seconds.
So years and years ago, I helped working on the comprehensive zoning ordinance when it was first passed, and I have hesitation in adjusting that zoning ordinance without a lot of public input, especially because we aren't doing a very good job enforcing the zoning ordinance as it's written. And I don't have a lot of confidence that we are going to do a good enough job really making sure that the changes that we're making are appropriately regulated.
Thank you, Ms. Mossing. Ms. McCarron, you've emphasized housing justice. How will you prioritize affordable housing in District A's budget, specific to rentals? You have 30 seconds.
Thank you. So I would make sure that we are funding all the housing trust fund and making sure that all of those partners have money available for that, and working with the capital plan for our right to counsel for eviction services, which we have funded annually every single year, and I will continue to do. And those are a couple different things that I think we can do for housing justice.
Thank you, Ms. McCarron. Mr. Morrell, you've spoken about civic engagement. How would you improve public participation in council decisions? You have 30 seconds.
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier forming a workers' council, which would be able to directly impact with workers that work in the district, and obviously want to expand that to community councils as well, whether that's based on geographic regions or specific communities, whether that's ethnic or nationally driven. But more importantly, like I said, I'm a grassroots organizer. I work from the bottom up, and I definitely want to be with people as they're making the decisions for their lives.
Thank you, Mr. Morrell. You should give yourselves a round of applause because we have reached the end of all of the questions for Council District A. As you guys head into election season, we here at Step Up for Action wish you the very best. It has been my honor to serve as your moderator for this evening's events. But I want to make certain that those of you who are listening in and engaging via the chat, early voting starts September 27th. It ends October 4th. Election date is October 11th. It is not easy to avail yourself of public service. So I thank each of you. I want to thank our candidates, Amy McCarron, Alex Mossing, and Robert Merrill, for availing yourselves to our listening audience and to share your platforms with us. So I thank you, and I wish each of you the very best as you head into election day. I will now turn it over to the co-founder of Step Up for Action, Ms. Maria Harmon.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you again for making time to join our forum this evening. Your participation is greatly appreciated, and it definitely helps our membership as we do our research and identifying who's the best candidate to support this election season. Again, thank you for your time and for your robust answers. I hope you all have a good evening and good luck on your campaigns.
Yeah, it's been quite the night. Thank y'all so much. I wish we could have been in person, but I think it worked out all the better. So good night, everybody. Best
Thank
of luck.
you.
Please don't
Thank you
forget
so
to
much.
vote. Take